Ready, okay.
Right, that's up. Welcome to the
Is there a paper agenda?
April Ward 1
Or no?
community meeting,
It's yours.
AKA Ward 1A NPA. So I'd like to start by just going around and having people introduce themselves. Maybe we can start in the room here and then we'll work to people who are connected online. So Keith, you want to start?
Okay, I'm Keith Pillsbury. I live on University Terrace in Ward 8.
I'm Tom Darenthal. I live on Nash Place. I'm in Ward 1.
I am Emily Lee, and I am a planning commissioner, and I live in Ward 8.
I'm Angie Chapel-Sokol. I live on North Prospect Street, Ward 1.
I'm Carol Livingston. I live in Ward 1 on Calarco Court, and I'm on the steering committee.
I'm Jonathan Chapel-Sokol. I live on North Prospect Street with Angie, and I'm on the steering committee.
I am Cynthia Cook, and I live on East Avenue in Brooklyn.
Leaning in one direction.
Ward 1, High Grove Court. And we have people online as well. Let's start with Alexander.
Hi, I'm Alex Friend. I live on Henry Street in Ward 1, and I'm a planning commissioner.
Okay, Kathy.
I'm Kathy Alwell, and I live on North Prospect Street, Ward 1. And I'm a school commissioner.
And CJ.
Hi, CJ Knudsen, representing the Vermont Lake Monsters. I live in Rutland, Vermont.
Okay, and Cyril. Are you there, Cyril? There you go.
Yes, sorry about that. I'm Ward 1. Thanks for double checking.
And the last person is Sam. Okay. Well, again, welcome. I think we're going to have a interesting meeting. The first agenda item is actually a request for future NPA topics. So if you don't already know, the steering committee meets a week after our monthly meeting, and we discuss topics that are generally sent to us via email. And if you have a topic that either came up tonight and is not sufficiently addressed, or a topic that just needs to be addressed, we would appreciate hearing back from you so we can get it into our schedule. Are there any announcements that people want to make? Anybody online want to make an announcement?
So CJ, this would be CJ's time, right?
Oh, sure.
CJ, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate everyone's time. I just wanted to join you guys to give you an update on the Vermont Lake Monsters and answer any kind of questions or concerns you might have for our upcoming season. Last year, as everyone knows, baseball was unsure if they were going to be returning to Centennial Field. We relaunched the franchise on March 15th. We had no baseball players at all. We are now a collegiate wooden bat league team. We sent out 1,300 emails to various colleges and universities across the country. We had over 65 players play for us, 11 of whom were actually from Vermont, which is the first time really ever in Vermont Lake Monster, Vermont Expo history. And we won the championship. So it went very well. We were named the organization of the year for the league. Our coach was named manager of the year, and I was fortunate enough to be named the executive of the year for the league. So it was a really, really positive year for us. And we plan on having baseball here for a very long time, which is great. And we're fully staffed from a front office perspective. And we have some fun promotions geared towards the community, geared towards the kids. And we kick off our season on May 27th, so Memorial Day weekend. And our last regular season home game is August 6th. So instead of playing 38 home games like we did last year, and for many years, we're playing 36 home games. So 2 less home games. And the other kind of major change is instead of playing our games Monday through Friday at 7:05, we're going to move that game time to 6:35 to make it a little bit early for everybody. We would like to do 3 fireworks shows. Those dates are Saturday, June 11th is the first one. The second would be Saturday, July 23rd. And the final third one would be Saturday, August 6th. The other thing that we would like to do is potentially hold movie nights. We'd have 4 of them. The first one would start on on Friday, August 19th. And they would run until September 16th. They're all family-friendly movies. They would start around 6:30, 7 o'clock. And people can go on the field, watch the movie, play catch, hang out, and just enjoy a night out at the ballpark outdoors.
Okay, thank you, CJ. Just a reference for people online, there is, I believe, at the bottom of your screen, a raise hand function. And if you want to talk, as Gail does, just press that raise hand function, and that way it's easier for me to see you. So with that, Gail, you're on.
Thank you. I'm Gail Rafferty. I live in Ward 6, actually. And a bunch of us from our neighborhood are hopping on to public comment for NPAs because we want to just alert people to a proposed ordinance change that relates to camping in Burlington's parks. And while the premise around this ordinance change would be to provide more options for people who may find themselves houseless. And while certainly our neighborhood supports Burlington's efforts to deal with that ongoing difficult situation, our group of neighbors who lives near Smalley Park feels that this ordinance change proposes some things that would probably certainly worsen the situation in parks, because it removes language that says camping in parks would be prohibited. And it also, even if certain parks were then turned around and labeled as being not appropriate for camping, if somebody were there, there would be a window of 30 days for affecting a removal. And additionally, this could relate to recreational camping as well in any of the parks. The way it's written legally, camping would be camping, and it could open the door to a number of people using the parks in a variety of ways that our neighborhood anyway is feeling would be problematic, and reduce the options for recreational use of our parks for kids and childcares. And our park is used by King Street Youth Center usually every day. And a number of other kids. We have a children's playground and a basketball court and a softball diamond, and that's about it. That takes up the field, the park. So our neighborhood had a lot of problems with folks living in the park last year. We've been dealing and working with the city quite a bit for the last year. But then on top of that, there is this new ordinance being proposed, or ordinance changes. So the reason we're hopping onto the NPAs is just to make people aware that that proposed change is in the works, and to say that if people have questions about it or concerns about it, you might want to contact the 2 counselors who are putting forward these ordinance changes, which are Joe McGee and newly elected Councilor Jean Bergman. Additionally, the committee that is currently holding public meetings about this is the Community Development and Neighborhood Revitalization Committee. Many of you might be familiar with it. And Councilor Sarah Carpenter chairs that, and Joe McGee and Zoroya Hightower are also on that committee with her. That committee is meeting next over Zoom next Thursday, week from tomorrow, April 21st at 5 p.m. If anyone were interested in going on, we're just really encouraging people, whatever you think about this, you may think it's a fantastic idea, but if you do or you don't, I think this is something worth the citizenry making themselves aware of it. The ordinance can be found, the proposed ordinance changes can be found on the CEDO website. If you go to the CDNR committee on the CEDO website, you see their documents, you'll see the ordinance. And then also that's where the Zoom link will go up probably at least 48 hours before the meeting next week. Yeah, I think that's it. Some of us also have been hopping over to coffee with the mayor, and he's not at this point in support of these ordinance changes, but which we feel happy about. But we just are just trying to alert people that that's in the works, and whether you're for or against it, it hasn't gotten a lot of publicity yet. So.
Okay, thanks, Gail.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for letting me hop on your NPA.
Cindy?
Yeah.
And then Richard?
Good evening, I'm Cynthia Cook,
Dave.
and I have 3 things, so I'll try to be concise. The first 2 relate to East Avenue, where I live. We circulated a petition a number of years ago now, and several hundred residents of the area signed the petition requesting the DPW consider traffic calming. And the good news is that they are considering it actively. The bad news is that they came up with a proposal that we don't feel is as well thought out as it could have been had they consulted with the residents. So we've asked for a few things. They're going back to the drawing board a bit, as I understand. So they're going to be trying to integrate the work that's proposed for East Avenue with the work that's done at the Colchester East Avenue intersection. They're also going to look at what can be done so that this work doesn't preclude having a northbound bicycle lane on East Avenue, which the current proposal would do, it appears. And a third thing we're looking for is more information about the crossing that's heavily used across University Road for the folks that are going up to the medical center. So Chapin promised that he'd be getting back to us in now a few weeks' time, hopefully. We were very much supportive of traffic calming. I really need to slow traffic down on East Avenue, but we're hoping that it's well thought out so it doesn't mean that future improvements can't be made. So that's the first thing. Second thing is East Avenue. A number of people here have been pushing for years to try to get East Avenue's numerous hazards fixed. It's so bad that in the wintertime, oftentimes older folks actually walk in the road rather than on the sidewalk because there's so much ice. There's so many gaps in the tripping hazards that my next door neighbor says she sees somebody tripping on the sidewalk every day. And the scheduling for working on this, which is a major arterial sidewalk in the area, it has been pushed back for a number of years now, and it currently is not on the 2022 this year's construction schedule. We're hoping that we can change that because it seems to a lot of folks that this ought to be one of the higher priorities in Ward 1. Mansfield Avenue luckily is going to be addressed, but Colchester Avenue, East Avenue, and around the corner to Campus Kitchen has not been addressed. So those are the East Avenue things. And one more thing, and this is mostly to UVM students who I think are going to be here, and I don't know if anybody is on Zoom now, but I'm working a lot with some Afghan folks who had to leave the country and are now here. I try to avoid the word refugee because I think it's sort of a bit pejorative, but I think of them as our new neighbors. And there are a number of 20-something guys, a lot of whom are living now on College Street area, that I would love to have connect with UVM students if you're interested. So this is just a reach out. My contact information is on the sheet about East Avenue that Charlie has taken a photo of. Cynthia Cook, ccook@adamantlecore.com. Would love it if UVM students are interested in connecting with these guys because they're 20-something and I'm an old lady, so they call me mom. You know, they really would like to connect with some 20-year-olds. So if you're interested, please reach out to me. Thanks.
Thanks, Cindy. Richard?
Just one idea for a future topic would be bicycle safety, and it's been a hot topic on Front Porch Forum for the last few days, and we're spending millions of dollars a year as a city on bicycle safety, yet there are no ordinances, as former chief Del Pozo testified about 3 years ago when it was addressed to him. There were no ordinances in the city for the Burlington Police Department, even if they were so inclined to enforce. So bad cycling behavior, dangerous practices, which I see every day standing on the street corner, goes ahead with impunity. So I don't see any city councillors on here, so it would be worth us to have this discussion. See you on that. We do need the city councillors to be engaged, even if just to say, no, we don't care. So thanks.
All right. Did you want to say something?
Well, I'm talking about Lake Newspaper, Vermont.
It's on the
Yes,
agenda.
Okay. All right. Is there anyone else that wants to speak out?
I know that your neighbor Dave Colley wanted to speak out, but I just texted him a few minutes ago because I don't know that he knew that it was a 6:30 start. So I don't know if we could leave him in, should he arrive.
We'll leave him in.
Great, thanks.
So hearing no other people, we're going to move forward to city councilor updates. Jack, I think you are the only counselor here. And we're looking for priorities for the coming year.
Sure, yeah, I can go. Maybe the early start time threw folks off. I didn't actually realize until today that it was the 6:30 start time. So that could be why the others aren't here. I'm not sure. Can folks hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we had our reorganization day, and for me, in terms of my priorities, so I'm serving on the same committees that I've been on this past year. Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee, I'm the chair of that, and then I serve on the License and Local Control Committee, as well as the Ordinance Committee. And I've been on council now for 3 years, going into my 4th year. My priorities, I would say, are the same as they were when I ran, both times, and really that they've been. I think a lot of the council work is responsive to issues that come up. So that's a lot of the nature of the job. So what I focus on definitely fluctuates based on what issues are pressing and what I'm hearing. But in terms of my personal priorities and what when I have the opportunity to be more proactive and initiate things, it tends to be in terms of confronting the climate crisis, as well as housing issues in Burlington. Those are the top 2 issues that I try to prioritize as much as I can. And I think an immediate example of that is at our meeting on Monday, I brought a resolution related to public transportation. Many of you have probably been hearing from Green Mountain Transit that they're planning to cut service as well as reinstate fares. There's still serious opportunity to avoid that from happening, however, and so I felt it was important for the council to weigh in and get involved and try to prevent these rollbacks from happening to public transit. So we did pass a resolution on Monday that encourages the state Senate to approve the transit funding that the House had passed, which would avoid both the rollbacks and the reinstatement of fares. And the resolution also takes this item up in the Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee so that we can talk with GMT, talk with board members, leadership there, and also legislators on how we can support and expand and improve transit rather than roll it back. So yeah, those are, I think, the climate emergency and housing remain my top priorities, and I'm eager to keep working on both of those issues, in committee and at the full council level.
Any questions for Jack? Cindy?
Yeah, hi, Jack.
Hey,
So
Cindy.
I'd love to know more about what you're thinking of doing about housing, because I know the council has spent a huge amount of time on short-term rentals, and that's a very small part of the housing stock in the city. I'd love to know what the council is thinking about doing in terms of fostering new housing, and also working with UVM. As you probably are aware, the enrollment increased by 500 students this academic year. That's a lot of students, and they all had to be off campus because on-campus housing was full. So 500 new people is a big hit for the city. So I would love to see the council actively rework the long-term agreement with UVM in terms of what they will do to supply housing for the students that they're bringing to the city. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. So yeah, I agree with you. The Airbnb issue, it has some impact on the housing crisis, and I would like to see us not lose, I've been pretty staunch within that conversation of trying to reduce as much as possible the conversion of long-term units to short-term rental units. But that is a small piece of the puzzle, and I'm frustrated that we've devoted so much time and resources to that, because it really is sort of a zero-sum game in terms of the capacity of the city council and specifically the ordinance committee. The more meetings that we devote to short-term rentals is directly pulling away from other priorities and other issues. But yeah, to answer your broader question, the UVM, one thing I will say, since you're talking more generally about housing, I am really proud of the work that we've done, the council and the administration recently around houselessness. I feel like we've made some huge leaps forward on that in the last 6 months. And this shelter pod village proposal is going to be a very interesting thing. It's not totally novel. Other cities have done this, but it's definitely a pretty new idea here. And I think there's great opportunity there to make a dent and really help get people on their feet who are struggling in our community, and give them some type of shelter that will provide them stability. So I'm excited about the personnel resources too that we're putting towards trying to end houselessness in Burlington. In terms of creating new housing, I think there's a number of things. I've talked to you all a lot about, getting rid of these parking requirements, which are one of the more cumbersome, both economically and space-wise requirements. That is almost over the finish line, so I'm really happy about that. But UVM is obviously huge, and they are proposing to do a large housing development on the Trinity campus. We've discussed it twice. It's been an executive session both times, and so I don't think that I can really say too much about it beyond what is being said publicly, which is somewhat minimal. I don't have it right off at my fingertips the number of beds that they're looking to build, but it would be a large number. And I think it's safe for me to say that I really want that to move forward, and I want the city to partner and ensure that UVM is moving forward that on housing a greater percentage of students, and to get at your enrollment point, that they're not just increasing enrollment proportional to the increase in housing. From everything I've heard and understood, the new housing they're building does far outpace the projections for future enrollment growth, so it would really make a dent in housing. But I see you shaking your head, so maybe you have different data, and please send me any data that you have on that. But I definitely want to do what I can to see UVM build a lot more housing and house a lot more of their students. And I think we've all kind of said that for years, and we've all believed that for years, but now we're actually having serious conversation with UVM about it, which is something that is pretty new. Like, that hadn't really happened in my time on council until recently.
So Jack, a quick follow-up. I don't know if you're aware that the parking area adjacent to the old Degosbriand, I forget what they call it, UHC, is zoned for housing. So there's
Say it
less-
again, Cindy. I was having trouble hearing.
Sorry, the parking area here. Where am I gonna go? By the old Degosbriand, near where you live.
By the old what?
UHC.
Okay. Oh, on Pearl Street, I'm just not catching the location that you're saying. And now the audio is just out entirely. We lost the audio feed from Alex. Can you hear it too, Kathy?
We can only hear you, Jack.
Okay, yeah, it just cut out entirely.
Out.
But I can hear Kathy, Alex, and we can all hear each other.
Here.
Oh, it's back now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's back now.
Okay, so we're talking about between the corner of Pearl and Prospect Street over to Waterman, that area.
Okay,
The parking area there.
UVM green, like that.
Yeah,
Sure.
yes. So west of the green.
Prospect and Williams, right?
What's that?
Yes.
Between
yes.
Prospect and Williams.
Yes, yes.
Sure,
Adjacent-
yeah,
So it's a
that
fairly
area.
big area.
yeah.
And it's right in the center of campus. So it seems like it ought to be explored in terms of potential housing because it's already zoned.
Okay, got it. I hadn't heard really that idea, but that makes sense.
I have to say something that living on University Terrace, we live next to a campus that has close to 2,000 students, and there are really no issues with us living that close. And it looks to me that Trinity College campus could also handle that number of students if the university decided to really develop that as a core campus. Their numbers that you're talking about are doing nothing. They include graduate students and they include a few undergraduate students. If they're talking about 400 or 500 beds, that's really not affecting us. And so what they're really saying is that, oh, you guys, you can suck it up in the Ward 8 district by taking in more students, which really doesn't do much for the livability of the area. The housing stock is deteriorating because of the lack of interest or caring for the buildings. And that is that's a core part of our city that is very close to the entertainment and the shopping center, where I think families, young professionals, service people would really enjoy the urban life, but we've really given it up to transitional 21 and 20-year-olds to enjoy the city, and then they move on. I can't see how we are morally or anywhere else, any other issues economically, thinking that that's okay for the university. Yet nobody says university has to take some more responsibility, social responsibility that we talk about in Vermont, to house more of its students, particularly because a huge majority of them come from well-off, out-of-state families.
All right, thanks, Keith. Alexander?
I just had something in response to what Jack said about the plans for UVM at Trinity campus. And, I guess we're off and running on the,
Yeah, should we just like transition?
you know,
It sounds like we're talking about housing and so. Do we want to, I don't know, Alex, do you want to hold on to your thought until we have?
I can wait. I can hold that
Okay,
thought.
I don't know. I mean, you're
Okay.
welcome to talk, but that's why we're here. So.
All right, we will be on that topic shortly.
But if we don't respond to our city
Yeah.
councilor,
I just have a question or two for Jack. The first one is, as a steering committee member, what should we do to make sure that all the counselors know what time the meeting starts? Because and it's not just a counselor, like it's Dave Colley didn't know either. So what's the path we need to take to communicate properly?
Well, I think I think everyone's used to the second Wednesday at 7. Is this going to be? So I don't know if this is just a tonight issue with the move to 6:30, or is this going to be a continuous fluctuation, or is this a permanent change? What help me understand?
The library closes at 8, and we don't think it's fair to ask the staff to stay more than an hour after closing. And so if the meeting ends at 8:30, then we have to clean the room out by 9 o'clock. So anytime we meet in the library, we'd probably be meeting earlier. That's why we're doing it this month. And we're still looking to meet.
Okay. So this could easily come up again then, essentially, if we use the library again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think maybe just, I think just an email with that and with the subject line, just something to grab the attention. I think we do get inundated with emails, and we definitely appreciate the reminder emails that you've been sending, Carol. I think that's a relatively new thing of sort of sending the counselors an email in advance of the meeting and letting us know any particulars for that meeting. So that's definitely appreciated. I think when the inbox is inundated, sometimes it can be, oh yeah, that's the reminder. We have NPA at 7, but maybe it was that detail of the time change that folks may have missed. I missed it on the initial pass myself, but I went back today and saw it. So I think it's you all are doing well. I don't think it's really on you. I think we need to be more flexible, or we need to be more eyes open for the potential fluctuation in time, I think, on our end. But just sending an alert email that maybe has that in the subject line would, I think, be as much as kind of you all could do.
Okay, Jack, I think that's good. Thank you.
We need to get going.
I was told by someone, Dave Colley, you wanted to speak out about something? And if you do, now's a good time.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, brief announcement, actually. One of the groups I participate with is the Community Coalition. This is a group of students and city officials, and some of the counselors attend from often. And it's hosted by the UVM Student and Community Relations Office. And I wanted to make an announcement that, a couple of years ago, actually it was about 2014, the Community Coalition instituted a survey of a citywide survey of issues that are going on in neighborhoods. And from what I understand, the Community Coalition is again going to undertake such a survey. So it's an opportunity to try to identify what are the current issues that are on people's minds and what's going on. So I just wanted to let people know that they're designing that survey. Their next meeting is going to be on April 22nd. So I think the discussion will be around, what are some of the questions that should be on the survey and what it might look like. So anybody that might be interested in participating is welcome to attend. The best way to find out about that meeting, I think, would be to go to the UVM Office of Student and Community Relation website. You can get the contact information there. Gail Champmois has been here at the NPA many times before. So also, if you have her email, you can send it to her. So just wanted to let folks know that that's an effort that's going to be undertaken.
Great. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, that just real quick to piggyback off that. That's a great space and a great opportunity for folks. It's in some ways similar to NPA, I would say, in terms of just bringing together folks from the district and talking about issues, but there's more students there typically than there are here. So it's a good opportunity I would recommend to anyone. And it's pretty easy to get on that reminder list about those meetings. They're typically on Fridays, I think, towards the end of the month. So yeah, feel free to contact me or just the Office of Student and Community Relations directly to if you want to be added to get those updates and try to attend those meetings.
And I'm just going to pop in to say hi. Sorry, I have board meetings every second Wednesday until 7 o'clock. And I didn't realize today's meeting, NPA meeting started at 6:30. So sorry for missing the first half hour. And yeah, feel free to ping me separately if there's anything I missed that I should be focusing on.
Okay, I think we're going to move forward, and if we have time, we'll come back. Okay, Zariah?
Sounds good.
We're at school board commissioners. Kathy, an update on the per pupil spending and maybe the high school?
First of all, BHS and BTC just put out 5 different plans for the new high school that are conceptual plans. This is just the beginning to figure out how much money we're going to have ask for on the ballot. And they are on the website, and we would ask that everyone please go look at them. There's also a questionnaire on the website so that we can get feedback as to how the community feels about these different options. And they go from 181 million, I mean, these are rounded off, to 196 million. They have different placement on the lot, etc. They are all the same, almost the same size. Some have more open spaces in them than others do, but look at them and please give us feedback, because this is all moving pretty fast because we have to get it done. And so we would appreciate as many people from the community as can to fill out that information. Read it, read all about them, and then give us feedback. So with S287, which is the weighting study, it was passed unanimously out of the Senate to the House Ways and Means Committee. And it is now in the House Ways and Means Committee. And sad to say, the House Ways and Means Committee decided to totally upend this S87. And they're now proposing that there not be weights, but there now be cost equity payments. And they have again, even though the Senate went back and forth about ELL costs, they have now pulled them back out and want them under categorical aid or a grant system. So for me, the problem with all of this is that this has happened so fast. We have been using weights for 30 years now, or 20 something years, almost 30. And now all of a sudden they've upended totally with this proposal that is supposed to be voted on this week out of Ways and Means to then go to the whole board, the whole House. They have totally changed this thing around. And personally, either they're trying to kill this bill, or I just don't understand that you would have a study done and spend months, a year and a half now on this, and now bring in a course of 3 weeks, a totally new funding. We are changing how we're funding education in this state if what they have proposed goes through. And there are no cost containments or spending thresholds in what they're proposing. So I don't know what that does to the taxpayers of this state. And it's amazing to me that this has gone this fast. And at this moment, that is the most I can tell you, because it's still being thrown around there, but it's disconcerting. I think that we probably do need as many people as possible to write. I think pretty much our Burlington representatives are still supporting the weights. And I must also say the city council, and I thank you very much for having put together a resolution on Monday at your meeting supporting the weights and supporting S287, which now looks totally different. So I will get out to you, Carol, before what are things people can do, so you can send it out with the minutes, because the coalition meets tomorrow night, and so I will, once I have the action that we're doing, I will send them to you so you can get them out to people. So that is what it looks like. It's not good, but it's how I guess democracy works, huh?
Any questions for Kathy? All right, Kathy, thank you very much.
Sure.
Next up, David.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, here comes.
Here, you can take my spot.
Okay, good. I just had back surgery, so I'm stand and sit. Hi, I'm David Shine. I am a representative of an organization called Big Heavy World, which some of you may know, which is a music advocacy organization that's been going on for 25 years. And its purpose is to advocate for music in Vermont, all over Vermont. And we've got a project that's part of a bigger project. It's called Make Music Vermont Day, Make Music Vermont Day. We keep changing that around. And it's part of the International Music Festival that occurs all over the world on the summer solstice, June 21st. So on June 21st, there are musicians in every big country making music in their community. The purpose of the International Music Festival and Make Music Vermont is to get people to play music for their communities and celebrate how music brings people together and crosses borders and differences. So my job is to get music going on June 21st, Tuesday, everywhere in the state. So I'm kind of going ward to ward, NPA to NPA to Burlington to find out what we can put in, this is 1 and 8, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I kind of grew up on Prospect Street for a while and then Maple Street for another. But I'm thinking the extent of 1 and 8 is UVM down the hill to the river.
Yeah.
Yeah, and where does it end coming down the hill on Willard Street or Maple Street or Union Street?
South Winooski.
Okay, so there's a lot of places music could happen there. I'm just scoping it out. You know, my dad taught at the old medical school, so the steps of Dewey would be a really nice little amphitheater for some music. And of course, you know, the ball field, and then down by the waterfall. And then there's the megalith, UVM, and there should be music outside the medical center, I think, you know, as people are going in and out, like I have too many times to get fixed up. So what I'm asking the NPA here, or a member of the NPA, is I would love to have one person that I talk to in the neighborhood who I could coordinate different events with. And my contact, I didn't bring paper, but I've got it here. I just want to put my contact information up on the screen here. And whoever wants to be part of it in the neighborhood, and you know, you can do it on your front porch. I mean, if you want to do a violin concerto for your neighbors, you know, on East Terrace or something, you could do it, you know. So this is anywhere. It's also for kids, if kids want to make music. If you got a musical kid, we want them on the Make Music Day map. So here's my information. Can you come in on it? Or do I have to go up there? Is it,
Good.
can you read it?
Getting there.
Oh, now we can see it.
Okay, I'm going to give people a second to copy it. And you can always go to Make Music Vermont and get in touch with me, David Shine. And I really want to get, if I got 10 sites in this ward and 1 in 8, it would be amazing. And there would be music everywhere in the town. So I'm trying to get that with all the NPAs and in different towns in Vermont. So you'll be hearing more about it, that VPR is a sponsor, Front Porch Forum is a sponsor, so you'll get another notice about it. And we want you to get involved. I think that's it for me.
I've actually got a question for you. Is this primarily a one-day event, or is this going to be like a crescendo on one day and it's going to smear out across the summer?
Well, for the last 40 years, it's been happening on summer solstice day, on the longest day of the year. So that's how this operates. Of course, once you get something like this going, people start having fun and thinking, oh, there could be music in the library. We're going to put a harp player in Fletcher, or we could have an event that involves music. That's what it's to promote, and all the musicians and it's a community event. It's free, but the more music you have going on, usually the more music gets going on. And that's what we do. So it's one day.
It's one day.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we hope it affects other days.
Okay, that's good to hear. And does anyone else have questions?
I'd like to say something.
Sure.
I had an opportunity to live in France for a couple of years, and for those 2 years that I was there, on June 21st, there was this music celebration, and people were so happy to be there. Part of it was that it was the beginning of the summer. Part of it was that it was just free music from everywhere, and there was dancing in the streets, and there was just a lot of joy because it was a shared community activity. So I'm delighted to hear about this plan. Thank you.
It started in France, and it's going to be very big in Vermont. It's going to get bigger and bigger. So.
All right, well, thanks. Next up, I guess Cyrus Oswald.
Hi, yeah, I'm online.
Hey, how you doing?
Well, thank you all so much for your allocation of time for me. My name's Cyrus. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a senator and speaker of the Vermont Undergraduate Student Government Association. I've been on it for 3 years now. I've lived in Burlington now for 4 years. And I was invited by Keith Pillsbury to come and talk with you all briefly about what the undergraduate SGA has been up to and some of our kind of concerns in quotes about Burlington or our kind of our priorities. Please pardon me not having been in person there. I should also note the SGA is in a period of transition right now. Like this week, we're switching from this past year's Senate to this next year's Senate. Our president, vice president just transitioned, and our senators are switching this next week. So although I can speak pretty well to what the SGA has been up to historically and what our common themes of goals are and whatnot, I can't totally say what we'll be doing next year because it hasn't happened yet. So firstly, just to give a brief overview of what we've been up to, we of course do a lot of things that are really focused on campus living and pretty student specific problems. For instance, there's been a big initiative this year to get expanded section descriptions for students before they sign up for courses, get menstrual products in all gendered bathrooms. There's also been things that kind of blur the line between on campus and off campus and relate to the broader community. Right now, for instance, it's Sexual Violence Awareness Month, and we're putting on a lot of programming that kind of relates to that area. This year, the focus is less about kind of the impact of sexual violence and the horrific nature of it, and it's more about kind of what does good relations in that area look like. Looking at a little broader, like community oriented things the SGA does. There's obviously like 42 senators on SGA, so there's a lot of different initiatives that go on. Kind of smaller one that I think is important to highlight is recently we've partnered with a club on campus to do some harm reduction practices for drug users off campus and on campus. We acknowledge that drug use will probably continue to happen, and we should try to do it in the least harmful way possible. Kind of larger thing we have is Earth Week is coming up. I sit on the committee on the environment, so we have a hand in planning this. Kind of surrounding Earth Week, for instance, this weekend, and then I think in 3 weekends, we're doing some community cleanups which we do periodically, and we kind of walk around various neighborhoods of Burlington in an effort to clean them up and reduce the litter on the ground and whatnot. Just briefly in the realm of climate activism, we're also working on revamping the University of Vermont's climate action plan, which I think will be seen in a big way throughout Burlington and probably Vermont, considering the I guess the influence that the university has on the state and the city. So the main thing that I think that the UVM students, the main interaction we have, for better or for worse, with the Burlington community is through housing. So I think this is kind of our primary area of concern as students in Burlington. I think it's pretty well recognized that there is a problem with housing in Burlington. We see this through a few reasons. Firstly, sophomores often have to start beginning their search for housing for their junior year. So almost a year in advance, you kind of have to be on top of it and looking for housing. People definitely recognize this as a burden, not only because you have to plan ahead like that, but also just because you have to sort out logistics for housing before you might even know that you're returning as a student or something like this. Similarly, there is a well-recognized housing shortage in Burlington. There just doesn't seem to be enough places to sleep for the amount of people that want to live in this beautiful city. Students definitely recognize that as an issue. Beyond the quantity aspect of it as well, there's kind of a recognition that there's a lack of quality for what you are paying for. There's, I think, a thought that this stems from zoning, where things are zoned for single family and then have many more than what might be defined as a family packed into them. This might be kind of beyond the scope of this organization, but who knows? It's a concern that students have. Not just to all highlight the negatives, though, I think that some of the coolest cooperation that students have with the Burlington community is through this area of housing, through things like through Is Good, which stands for Isham Street something. Brian Sinna, really great initiative. Yeah. Sorry, what was that?
This is Brian China's his project.
Yes, sorry for mispronouncing his name there. My apologies. But people recognize that as a pretty cool initiative that's really transformed that street in a fairly short period of time. People both who live on that street and off that street, I think, recognize that as a worthwhile project. So yeah, those are all the items that I just wanted to touch on to give the student perspective, if you will. I apologize for not having been, I guess, aware or at this this body previously, but thank you all so much for your blocked off time and your ears during that time. I'd love to take any questions, or if there's anything that you all would want me to bring to the new PVP as they're kind of forming their goals for their year leading the SGA, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Questions?
Just a comment, Cyrus, it's great to have you here. We'd love to have you and others from the SGA and the UVM and the broader UVM community be even more actively involved, because it really is great when we can talk together and work out issues. And so please come back.
Thank you. Yeah, I also unfortunately transitioned, but I'll definitely I was unaware of these But I will definitely put in my transition report to my successor that this is likely a body they should be coming to and periodically giving some updates.
Well, and we just heard about the community coalition, and it sounds like that's another good intersection where some of us could come to that meeting, because I think, to be honest, and it's not your fault, but students often, we have a tough time because we struggle with the issues around housing and sometimes student behavior, but it's made it so that sometimes NPA meetings are not the most comfortable place for students to be perfectly honest. So that's on us to work on as well. I had a couple questions about some of the things that you mentioned. I'd be interested in hearing, you said students recognize that the quantity of housing is limited. They also see the quality suffering. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you know that, how it's getting communicated to landlords? Just, give me some more story behind some of that, if you would.
Yeah, I unfortunately can't provide much like data in that way. A lot of it is kind of anecdotal, but there's kind of the stereotype that a lot of students, I would say, rightfully hold about the student housing, which mostly stems from just bad landlords, I guess. They often, let me give a personal vignette. We in our unit pay for a dishwasher. We have a dishwasher in my house. It's been broken now for about 3 weeks, and after numerous numerous notifications to our landlord, it remains broken. I think this is a common problem with landlord-tenant relations more generally, but students definitely recognize this type of like poor, landlord interaction as having detrimental impacts on properties over time, where you end up with a kind of less than ideal housing situation that you still are paying, $800 a month for. So that's just a note on the quality of it. Quantity wise, I mean, UVM students definitely contribute to this problem. Every year, UVM admits more and more freshmen, and thus we're putting a kind of excess strain on the housing situation in the Burlington area. So I'm not saying we're not to blame. It's just an issue that we're recognizing. Does that kind of help answer that question?
Yeah, and I guess I wonder about just how students are informed about landlord-tenant advocacy, how they can there are resources available in Burlington for tenants. And if there's a way that students might be able to get some of that information to be able to advocate for themselves, maybe that's a good topic to talk about at the community coalition, but it just seems like it's a struggle that a lot of students and other tenants have, that it would make sense that that's a great intersection of support for one another.
And if I may follow up, oh, sorry, were you?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know that there has been there is work done on this. Oscar, who holds community coalition, the Office of Student Community Relations, they do distribute those materials and have an off-campus student letter that pretty periodically has tips and tricks and resources for students to use in landlord-tenant relations. But I think that part of it is kind of a supply-demand thing where students need to live off campus. Landlords just need to provide, a place with utilities and a bed, and students will pay for it. So, I think it's a problem from both sides.
I have a question for Cyrus.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Alex Friend. Can you talk a little bit about the cost of living on campus versus off campus?
Yeah, I don't have the figures in front of me to super speak to it. However, I can speak to the culture and my understanding of it. I believe it is more expensive to live on campus. That having been said, though, there are reasons why someone might choose to live on campus. You are closer to your classes. You might be surrounded by more students in your age group. The culture of it definitely, though, is that students will choose to live on campus as recommended by the university for their first 2 years, and then choose to move off campus. I know right now the university is looking to expand the number of beds that they have available, namely on Trinity campus. And also there's been increased forced triples, meaning like there's too many freshmen incoming where typically the dorm room that would hold 2 people is now holding 3 people. This will likely cause even more strain on downtown housing. Living on campus, though, is definitely something that students continue to do. And I think that with any luck, the university will build that housing to meet that increased on-campus demand from increased admissions. Does that help? Does that speak to that sufficiently?
I've just heard some students talk about how expensive it is to live on campus and how they've been, as soon as they get the opportunity, like when they become juniors, that they move off campus because it's cheaper. Like the people who struggle to pay the bills, it's really a problem. That's all.
That's definitely true. Yeah. I'm not saying that like that exclusively off-campus living is too expensive. It's just that's the more main interface, I guess, that UVM students have with their broader Burlington community.
Cool. Thank you.
Of course.
Cyrus, thank you very much for coming to this meeting. And I will speak for this council to just say, this could be a very valuable exchange over time that your group comes to our meetings. But more importantly, I just want to say about the cost of university housing and how expensive it is and how limited housing is, actual housing in the city. And it can be less expensive than the university, but affordable for people. And it seems to me that it is the university who is in control. They have rent control over the city of Vermont, the city of Burlington. And I just look forward to the city of Burlington and the University of Vermont being able to talk about it at that level, that it shouldn't be so onerous for students to be paying for their education in their room and board at such cost to have to come into this city. And it's not that we don't welcome students. We were all students once and we wanted to live off campus, but that it interferes or it displaces people who might otherwise want or need to live here, people who work here or young families who might want a chance to rent an apartment themselves or buy a house themselves. And it just seems to me that the university has too much control over housing in the city of Burlington. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Hey, Cyrus, I want to take the conversation in a slightly different direction. That's we have struggled to find a way to effectively talk to students, the student population at large. And we do put messages out on Front Porch Forum, but I don't believe that there's a lot of students that really follow that. What would you recommend? What's a good way for us to reach out to the student population who's, it's a large number of the community that we're in.
That's a great question. If I knew the appropriate avenues with which to get in touch with students at the university, broadly speaking, I probably would have been a lot more successful on my time on the student government. Students are, it's fair to say, can be somewhat disengaged. But I would think that speaking with more focused groups like the Student Government Association would be a good way to do that. I mean, our job is to represent students. And so maybe even just, maybe I'm not thinking quick enough or creatively enough, but interactions like this would probably be the best way. You could always go to campus and just like talk to students, but having done that myself for a variety of initiatives, sometimes people don't really want to talk. So that's a great question. I would advise, I know Front Porch Forum, and I can say that students aren't really on it. I think though that seeking out more focused groups to talk to would prove more successful. Does that help answer that at all?
It sounds like we still have a pretty steep hill to climb.
Yeah, it's fair to, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not, students can be an issue, yes.
Okay. And Keith, I think you want to say something.
Cyrus, I just wanted to thank you for coming, and I also wanted to thank you for inviting me and allowing me to speak when I was a Ward 8 school commissioner to the SGA, because I found that your group was very attentive and their questions were fabulous and got me thinking. And so that's the one way I tried to reach out as a school commissioner, is to meet with you. It seemed like it was every 3 or 4 weeks, and you guys were very receptive. And I appreciate when you were managing the meeting, your meetings are very well run and you're very organized and you are very engaged in asking fabulous questions. So I want to thank you for that. And I also want to thank you for showing up tonight. I really appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Okay. Yes.
Couple quick questions. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Cyrus, this is on a different subject, and it may not be a fair question to ask you. Why do students own cars? The other aspect of life as a resident of the city is the number of cars that are on the streets or parked on the streets. What are the reasons why students feel a need to have cars in the city? And I know there's a lot of good ones. And I also understand, for example, that there's tons of students involved with club sports, and there's almost no way to get to where you have to work out or practice. So is that something you can talk a little bit about? I'm sure I see it.
I can make my best guesses, certainly.
Yeah, just make it up.
I definitely, I personally don't have a car here, so I kind of can share that sentiment. However, all of my roommates do, right? So you're right. I think that part of it, maybe the reason why I want it to be, is because UVM students on the whole are fairly outdoorsy, and in Vermont, the number one way to get into the great outdoors is frankly by personal vehicle. So I think that's part of it. Secondly, I think that the kind of the lack of really accessible public transportation, accessible isn't the right word. Public transportation in Burlington is somewhat lacking, especially considering the climate. That meaning the weather, I guess. A lot of times it's very cold, where you might not want to wait for a bus. I interned for Green Mountain Transit, and they have really a pretty excellent network of buses, but I think that the climate kind of discourages people from waiting for the bus. I think there's also it must be said, there's some kind of status aspect to it, to having your car around, and there is some status to that ease of mobility. So those are some of the reasons that I would identify why UVM students have cars, and so often push to have cars. As an on-campus student, or especially a freshman, the university somewhat there's jets going. The university okay, I guess, yeah, you want to the university somewhat discourages you from having a car on campus, but I realize that off-campus students are likely the ones who are, taking your parking spots. Yeah.
Carol, you had something?
Yeah, I just would pass, if you would pass on for us to the new officers in your organization, just the list of emails that are on our agenda, because we really would like to contact them and have them contact us. And work forward, perhaps a closer relationship than what we've been able to have so far. So that, and just convey to, you know, the incoming folks that there's real interest on our part to develop that relationship. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can say that the current vice president, or the newly elected vice president, has chaired the Committee on Legislative and Community Affairs, Sarah Wood. She's been at Community Coalition. This is something she's interested as well.
Okay.
All right.
But I will pass on. Sorry.
Thanks. We're going to move on to the housing panel. Keith, you're going to run this?
Yes.
Okay.
When we asked our city councilors back in December what the major conversation was that people had with them, a topic about, it was housing. And it seemed like that would be something that this NPA ought to be talking about, if that's the major issue of our residents. And we had, a couple months ago, we had Brian Pine and Megan Tettle in from the city, and we also had representatives from University of Vermont talking about their housing, about housing in the East District. We now, we thought we would put together some questions to ask people who have volunteered to be on the planning commission, which I know is a thankless job and very time consuming. And we wanted to kind of get some of their thoughts and thinking about the East District and housing and development. And we really appreciate the fact that Alexander Friend is here and Emily Lee is here. I'm not sure, is Bruce here? Okay, I guess not. We have a set of questions we're going to ask that were kind of things that we've heard from various residents in the ward. And I just got a reinforcement of these questions yesterday as I was walking up College Street from another neighbor. So I'm going to ask the questions, and then at the end, we will have facilitated, people can make comments or questions about the planning commissions or about my questions I asked. The first question we have is, the planning commission involves much detailed work in understanding complicated regulations. It is clearly not a position for everyone. Why have you decided to be appointed to this commission? Emily?
I asked myself that question every single day. I've been on the planning commission for, I think, over 10 years. And the way that I ended up on the planning commission is that I ran for city council about 10 years ago and I lost. And I think as a concession, I was appointed to the planning commission, and I became engaged in my neighborhood and planning issues when I bought a house on Bradley Street. And then I worked with the neighbors to change the zoning in my neighborhood around the for unrelated rule, which some people might remember that that time in Burlington history. And so through changing the zoning and working and organizing community members to be able to do that, I got engaged in the planning process and ended up on the planning commission. And I think that the planning commission is one of the most important places in city government, and a lot of the issues that we want to tackle, such as housing, such as climate change, really manifest themselves in planning decisions. And if you think about the quality of life in Burlington, so much of it has to do with the built environment, and it has such a huge impact in how we live. So it feels like an important place to be able to volunteer my time and give back to my community. So that's why I'm on the planning commission.
Thank you. Alexander?
Yeah, Alex is good. It's always terrible to follow Emily. The reason I wanted to get more involved in city government, I had a little bit of experience in, advocating for the city not to sell Burlington Telecom. And there was something I wanted to do. And I got to say, Keith, that being a planning commissioner is much less thankless than being a school commissioner, but and also being a city councilor. So I also thought that there was a lot of opportunity to influence the shape of Burlington to come issues around housing and what buildings we put up. I mean, it's more about the zoning than a specific building, but that there was an opportunity to get on the planning commission because the person whose seat I took resigned over the vote to construct the site now known as the Pit. So I've sort of always been interested in architecture and planning, and I wanted to do something very different than anything else I'd done professionally. So I was lucky enough to get appointed.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that you've decided, or you've been willing to take on this issue or this mission as planning commissioners. The next question is, what do you, as an individual living in or near the East District, think the major development and land use issues are for the East District? You want to go first, Alex, this time?
I mean, Keith, it's UVM. I mean, what else is there? I mean, the problem with Burlington and this knot we can't untie is that you have one actor, this one part of the community, the university, that it brings a lot to the city, but it also has this really outsized influence. And it's, it's sort of a struggle to get a number on the number of students or the number of housing units, the number of student housing that is off campus. And it is, we have something like, what do we have, Emily, 10,000 renters in Burlington? I'm not sure of the actual number of housing units, but the city has this crazy outside influence because you have all these students who have basically are completely price insensitive. They'll pay whatever they have to live here. There are some who can't, afford to pay whatever it takes, but the majority of them, their parents can pay $800 a month for rent for one lousy room. So that is the problem. I mean, as far as, you have one of the other questions, Keith, about like, where would we put other housing? I mean, I'm not sure exactly. There's not a lot of open land in wards 1 and 8.
Emily?
Well, yeah, I think in wards 1 and 8, this, need for housing for students is a big issue, and it's just the demographics of Burlington. I think that we just need more housing altogether, and it's not necessarily that we need housing specifically for students. And I think that building permanent long-term housing instead of dorms is actually going to serve the community better because it's more flexible. As we see the demographics of people who are attending college as undergraduates is going to change, just as the number of people who are choosing to do that fluctuates with, the demographics of our society. I think building long-term housing is actually going to serve our community better. And I guess I would add to that the other thing that I think really drives housing in 1 and 8 is transportation and cars. And, I know Jack and I and other people have been working to eliminate the parking requirements. I think as a community, we need to change how we think about cars and how we approach transportation as a community, because cars are not serving us. And we're all in on cars. We have invested fully in that infrastructure and in parking, and it's not serving our community. And it's actually, and our love of parking and our requirement of parking has led us to really limit development in wards 1 and 8. I think that we kind of speak out of two sides of our mouths. In 1 and 8, myself, I've been guilty of this too. We're always screaming, we need more housing, but we don't want it built next to our house. So we as a community all need to step up and embrace, small ADUs being built by our neighbors, carriage barns being converted to apartments, garages being converted to apartments, basements being converted to apartments. And we have to be open to having students live next to us and with us in our communities if we're going to be successful about handling this. Yeah, that's what I would add.
Thank you. I won't give my response or opinion. I'm not trying to be a facilitator.
Sure.
So I don't feel like whatever, because I didn't respond or give you any good feelings. What do you think are impediments to development in the East District to provide more housing for non-student residents? You probably already said something.
Impediments to, well, I think Alex mentioned it too, is just the pricing disparity and the income disparity between someone who lives in Burlington and works in Burlington and makes a Burlington salary versus someone who's from out of state and has an income from out of state that's supporting their rent. They have more purchasing power than a local resident, and it drives up the prices. So that's a real challenge. And yeah, I think that just purely the number of units that are available in Burlington is making it more difficult for Burlington residents to be able to afford apartments in Burlington.
Alex?
I have a thought. We haven't really talked about this in Planning Commission, but I get the sense that we're going to talk about it sooner or later. And that is, we need more housing at just about of every level, including affordable housing. And one place to create that is to change the zoning in residential zoning districts. And that attitude is probably not going to be terribly popular, but it's a discussion that we should have. We've tried to approach that with Emily. As Emily said, we made the approval process for accessory dwelling units much simpler, but those are expensive to build. And so the idea that we essentially that the requirement in the residential district is that you have only no more than 30%, I think it's a lot coverage. So if we might want to approach that differently and as a way to create more housing.
What development planning is the Planning Commission doing with UVM, the largest employer and recruiter of persons, students and staff in the East District?
You want to start, Alex, or do you want me to?
Can we do it both at the same time?
One,
why don't you go, Emily?
3, go. I know I think it's important to maybe outline what the Planning Commission is and what our role is. So we're more of a legislative advisory body. So the staff and the mayor's office really determines the direction of the Planning Commission, and the city council does. So we are more likely to get referred something that's already been slightly cooked to have our input on it, rather than to spend time brainstorming and coming up with solutions from the ground up. So it's really the agenda that's set by the administration or the city council are the things that we are going to be working on. And right now, we're working on the Trinity campus. It's come to the Planning Commission, and we've been asked to, weigh in about the pending zoning changes for Trinity campus. And I can say for myself that I'm really supportive of there being housing on Trinity campus. I think it's close to the university. And I think if it's built well, it can fit in nicely with the neighborhood and really improve that area.
The housing closest to the, okay, go ahead, sorry. Did Alex have something? Did I miss anything?
Just that UVM doesn't tend to share their plans. They are not, they're not terribly forthcoming. I think we got a lot out of them. Did Richard Kate present at an NPA meeting earlier this year?
No, he was on a video, I think, though.
Right. I actually got a lot of information about their plans from a meeting that he presented at.
I want to add in, because I want to say, Anne, Brenya, I got your text, and you're right. More housing on campus is critical, and UVM does have the ability to build more housing on campus. I would like to see it be, year-round housing and not dorms, because I think, as I said before, it's more flexible and can serve our community better in the long run.
Okay. The housing closest to the urban commercial core is composed mostly of college student rental units. What do you think the Planning Commission could do to encourage a mix of generations living in the area?
Well, we did have a proposal come up maybe a year ago, Alex. I don't know if you remember this, about making low-income units have an easier process through planning and zoning, like avoiding some of the density requirements. And I don't know what happened to that, if it died in city council. Do you recall, Alex?
I'd like to know why I don't remember that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time working on a proposal to basically make it that if it was a low income unit, that it could go through planning and zoning easier and didn't have to follow the density requirements or have parking. And I think income sensitivity is a way of, giving bonuses and incentives for low income units is a way to provide housing for people of different generations. I think providing housing for elderly people too. I think that downtown Burlington wards 1 and 8 is a great place for college students because it's close to the campus and it's close to downtown, but it's also an excellent place for older people. And I can tell, a personal story about my uncle moved to Burlington from Washington, D.C. when he was in his late 60s, and he had early onset dementia. And he lived across the street from me in an apartment building, and he lived there for about 8 years. And it was an incredible thing to watch, because if it wasn't for being in a walkable community like Ward 8, he would have been in probably an institutional setting like the Arbors or memory care. But he was able to live independently for a very long time and walk around downtown and go to City Market and go to the YMCA. And the community at City Market and the community at YMCA really supported him in his independence. Like, he used to forget his swim bag at the YMCA every single day. And every single day, a staff member from the YMCA would walk his bag to his apartment and put it outside of his door. And almost every single day, he would forget his debit card at City Market, and the City Market would hold the receipt until one of us could come there and pay it for him. And people knew him, and we had a community, and we supported each other. And my community and my neighbors supported Jeff, and I think that he lived longer independently than he would have been able to pretty much anywhere in the country. So anything we can do to create more communities that have that variety of types of people living in it that can support each other would be my goal as a planning commissioner, as a community member.
Alex, do you have anything to add?
I don't, but that's a fantastic story, Emily, about just how stimulating, it is to live in a normal environment and where people know you as opposed to an institution.
When you're older and you have something like dementia, you can't drive a car. And if you can't drive a car, you can't participate in society unless you're in a walkable community like we have. So I hear a lot of people complain about Burlington, and we're always showing up to meetings and griping. But I think it's really important to remember that we live in one of the most fantastic communities in the entire country. And we have a walkable infrastructure, and you can live in Burlington without a car. And this is a fantastic place to be.
Keith, I'm sorry. I think it's a really good question. I don't have an answer for you. And something I hadn't considered is sort of like, what could the city do at a policy level to encourage, other types of housing or, people. I mean, it's essentially it's college student rentals. So you'd have to have some other initiative to encourage a mix of ages of resident types. I don't know what that would be.
What recommendations from your studies and plans are you providing the city council with for the East District to have a more balanced mix of student transitional renters and long-term renters and owner-occupied living units?
Well, one thing is I'm a real proponent of owner-occupied incentives, like allowing ADUs for owner-occupied houses, and talking about Airbnb, not allowing on a limited basis Airbnb for owner-occupied houses as ADUs or accessory units. So I think those are ways that we can incentivize that.
Okay. Did you want to add anything, Alex?
I don't have anything to add on that point. Thanks.
Okay. What are your thoughts regarding housing density, housing of students in neighborhoods, filling in space over large parking lots with housing units, and height of buildings in our East District?
That's a big question. I'll start with the heights. Maybe you can remind me about the other points.
Well, yeah.
I think that you want to have a scale of building where the top of a building and the street relate to each other. I think I lived in Paris after college, and that is an incredibly dense city, but none of the buildings are over 5 stories. So I think before we think that, building one rocket that's, 16 stories tall is going to solve all our problems, we have a ton of density that we could have on a smaller scale, such as 5 units. It's also easier to build buildings of that size because you don't necessarily have to have an elevator for all buildings that size. So I think in our in wards 1 and 8, I think, something around under 5 stories or 6 stories would be appropriate. And then parking lots, you said.
Yeah, parking lot. We have quite a few big parking lots.
Yeah, well, I think that if you look at a downtown Burlington, 25% of downtown Burlington is parking lots. And that does not include street parking. We devote an incredible amount of our public right of way to cars, and I'm over it. We need to be building on parking lots and not be housing cars, and be housing people instead.
Alex, do you have any point?
Emily's right. Our post-war addiction to cars is a relatively recent phenomenon, and those parking lots are covered with asphalt. All of that, the runoff drains into the lake. They're essentially unused at night. I mean, it's a terrible waste of space that could be, you could have housing over it and still park cars underneath even. So that's my thought about parking lots. As far as density, Burlington is where we should have greater density. I mean, I think it's probably more appropriate for places closer to downtown than in wards 1. So that probably includes part of Ward 8, but we have, I think this, I'm not exactly sure where the form district for parts of downtown include zoning that allows up to 5 or 6 stories. I think that would be appropriate. It would be a way to get that more housing. I don't know if that answers your question specifically, Keith.
Yeah, that's what you're thinking about it. In what ways are you cooperating with other regional planning commissions to reduce the use of prime agricultural land and other natural resources outside the city to provide housing for those who would prefer to live in the city but are unable to locate and purchase available living units in Burlington?
I don't know that we as a planning commission have a lot of capacity to, have joint meetings and coordinate with regional planning. And it's not really our purview because we are like the Burlington Planning Commission. But I do know that staff definitely coordinates on a regional basis on a state level about initiatives like that. So I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Is Andy Montrell still on the Regional Planning Commission?
You know, I bet he is. I
Yeah.
bet you, yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, you know, it's partly a function of like Vermont's nature of local control, that in other states, the control is much more exercised at the county level. You know, I wish we had that kind of discussion with other communities. Like, for instance, South Burlington just voted to restrict development in the southeast quadrant of South Burlington, which is the wealthiest and least developed part of the city. Is essentially that some of the land neighbors didn't want some developers to build more housing developments there. So they got that passed, and it's, you know, those would be, you know, what those housing developments would be market rate at, you know, $500,000 or $600,000 a house. So it wouldn't be terribly helpful. That it was not a very forward-thinking rule that they passed, in my opinion.
Thank you, Alex. I'm now going to turn it back over to Tom, and he's going to call on people who have comments or questions. I know that Cindy does, and there are probably others that have questions, both on present and on Zoom.
Cindy, you want to start us off?
Well, sure. So two themes that kept coming up in these comments were the major power that UVM has, and another one was the idea of converting parking areas to housing, and wanting to sort of weave those together a little bit, and wondering if you as planning commissioners see any opportunities to convince UVM that they might be more proactive in terms of a comprehensive plan for housing on campus and infill, maybe perhaps converting some of those parking areas. You know, there was the memorandum of understanding, which goes back, I think, even before your time, Emily, where that isn't really enforced in terms of how much, what the percentage of students that should be housed on campus.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have any ideas in terms of how to have that more holistic conversation that would be so useful for us.
You know, I am just like everybody else. I'm just appalled at how UVM participates in the housing issue. And I understand why they don't want to build housing, because it costs money, and why should they build housing when students can live off campus? And it's also a commitment of resources. And, you know, like I said before, they have changing enrollment numbers and demographics. So maybe in 10 years, enrollment's going to be a fraction of what it is now. And then they'll have all this housing that they built. So it's clear why UVM doesn't build housing. We've had many different administrations in Burlington, and it seems like no one has ever really been able to hold UVM's feet to the fire and make them build housing and house their students. We've been having, I mean, we signed memorandums of understanding, and then, you know, you always look back and the enrollment's higher than ever, and there's still no housing, or they built new housing, but they tore down a dorm at the same time. So they've never made a meaningful impact or effort, I think, to address housing. And I think, frankly, they have no interest in doing that. So I don't know how to hold their feet to the fire. They do play an integral part in our community. You know, 25,000 people come to Burlington because of UVM, and we have 40,000 people in Burlington, period. And you think about the employment of people at UVM, and the students spending money downtown, and parents dropping off their kids. And, you know, we are a university town. So, you know, we can't get rid of students. We don't want to get rid of students. We're a university town, and that's what makes us a vibrant town that we are. So I think I get back to the idea that we just need more housing, period. And that'll house students and also house other people who want to live in Burlington, and we need more density. So I don't have a good answer.
So quick follow-up, is there any hope that's available through the Trinity College rezoning? Is there any way to get that, to have a broader?
Well, you know, it's a tricky situation because when you say, is there any hook to get UVM to do something different with the Trinity campus? What they're doing with Trinity is developing housing.
No,
So
I wasn't saying different with Trinity College, that area. I was saying do something more comprehensive.
oh, is there any hook to make UVM do a comprehensive, bigger housing plan? No, there's not. I mean, I just don't know. How do you force UVM to build housing? Encourage. I mean, there's the payment in lieu. The city has a negotiated contract about resources with the university. So if we get a really, hardball administration, makes them pay more, maybe. But, we've been having the same conversation as long as I can remember, going back a very long time in Burlington. And frankly, the problems only become worse because there's more students than ever at UVM.
I think it would be a question for Megan Tuttle, like legally, what could we do if, an applicant comes to this planning commission and says, we'd like you to change the zoning for this reason, how could we put conditions on that approval? I'm not sure the answer to that question. That I heard that, I think it was in an NPA meeting earlier this year. One of my neighbors said we shouldn't give them the zoning change unless they will only put more student, unless they won't increase enrollment. And I don't know if we could put those conditions on there. It's nice to think that we could, but on the other hand, UVM, the only way they have of raising money essentially is to admit more students, and probably, I think their numbers are something like 2/3 of their students are from out of state, which is where they get a lot more tuition than from the in-state ones. I'm not trying to be sympathetic to UVM here. I'm just saying that there are some realities that they face. I think it seemed Richard Kate didn't say it outright in the presentation I saw, but that he left open the possibility that they would not be housing juniors or seniors on campus. And my understanding is that a lot of the juniors and seniors don't want to live on campus. They have a lot more freedom off campus. I also asked Richard Kate about developing some of those parking lots at the UHC campus, which is between South Prospect and South William Street. And he said that was in the future plan somewhere. So.
I think I saw Sharon Busher had her hand up.
Could be. She's an attendee.
She was an attendee, but I thought I saw a little notice that said Sharon Busher raised her hand.
Also Kathy Alwell.
I just want to say, Alex, the latest figure that we got from UVM is 72% of their students are from out of state.
Right there.
Yeah, she's here.
And also, Alex, it probably is because the culture is to move off of campus when you're a junior. How do we change culture? I think that's the question. In our schools, we're asking our elementary and high school students to change their attitudes about being in an integrated school. And it seems like UVM could deal with their students in developing residences that are more fun to be near each other than to be downtown. So
I think students can be really wonderful neighbors. And I've come a long way on this one. I think if anybody thinks back to 10 years ago when I started serving on the planning commission, I think I was really hostile to students. And the things that changed for me is my partner Eric is a lot nicer than I am, and I got a dog. And those two things in my community, I was able to connect with a lot more students around me. And I have to say that putting the effort into getting to know my neighbors and introduce them to the community has led to a stronger sense of community and a nicer living situation for me. I used to have problems with noise issues in the house next to me, but because those students walk my dog and are part of my life and I've invited them in, they're really, really sensitive to keeping me up at night or disturbing me. So it's tough because it does put the onus on us as long-term community members to do the work of creating the community. But I've found that students can be really wonderful neighbors. It's just nice to have a healthy mix between students and long-term residents, I think, is the best thing. And, you know, students want to be good neighbors and they want to be part of our community too. They're not all just here to party, and they're not all rich either. That's the other thing. I think that there's this idea that all students are from out of state and all students are really wealthy, and that's not the case. And there's a lot of very hardworking students in our communities who are struggling to pay rent just like anybody else, that are struggling with student loans, buying food for themselves, paying their tuition.
Go ahead.
Actually, it's not a quick question, but I really don't understand how the planning commission works.
Sure.
Is the planning commission at all proactive, or are you just react to proposals that come to your table?
We're mostly reactive. Like I said before, we're like a legislative body. So we make rules, right? But the agendas are really set by the staff, which is really driven by the administration and the city council. We can, you know, as a planning commission, we can say we want to do this, or we can have somebody come to planning commission in public forum and maybe say, like, I really need this to be changed because of X, Y, or Z. And we will, you know, vote as a commission to put it on the agenda and then refer it to staff and say, you know, we're hearing from a lot of community members that they want, you know, to allow swimming pools in Ward 8. We've had that come forward 10 times. So we'll refer it to staff and say, staff, can you please come up with some language around a swimming pool ordinance for, you know, for residential high density? And then, you know, staff will come to us later with that language, and then we will have input on it and cook it up until we think it's something good. And then we send it to city council and they usually kill it right away.
Well, I guess where I wanted to get was, there's been substantial developments in terms of employers. Not in the last couple of years, but when they put the new building in the hospital, I think they brought more employees in. All right. The dealer.com brought in, I don't know, at least 5, 6, 7,000
right.
Employees. And now there's a new development on the waterfront, or not, within the last couple of years, that Hulu. Yeah. When those people come in, does the planning commission say, where are they going to live? Where are the employees going to live? I mean, how do you, if you say yes to employers and you say no to, or you don't ask the question of where they're going to live, what we end up with is the same situation that California has in Silicon Valley. And that's that they say yes when any employer wants to put up a building, but they said no to any zoning that's not single family housing. And so now you have people driving, you know, up to a couple hours to get to their jobs.
Well, I think, speaking for myself, I'm not saying no to any zoning that's anything but single family housing to start. And I think you raised the, you know, Hula. There's a proposal, you know, there's a push and a proposal to develop a big parking lot that's really close to the Hula building. And the people who are, who developed Hula are working on developing that into housing to address exactly what you're talking about, which is that as, you know, as an employer and as a business, you're bringing people to Burlington and there's it's difficult transportation and there's nowhere for people to live. And I think that everybody feels the same way you do. I don't think there's a lot of people who are involved that are saying we don't want to build new housing. And we're working to make that easier through addressing, parking restrictions and density and some of, we've changed form-based code in the downtown. So we haven't been sitting on our hands. We've been doing things to make it easier to build in Burlington. But as you can see with this huge hole in the middle of our downtown, there's a lot of different factors that contribute to whether or not you can build or not. It costs a ton of money to build anything right now. And it takes capital to do that. And it's a really high risk investment to build something, at all. So there's strong market forces, and it seems like, oh, why isn't everybody building? It's so easy. There's so much money to be made, but there isn't, because if there was so much money to be made, we'd have, some national REITs coming in and building buildings like we were Houston, Texas, but we don't.
Sharon Busher, you've had your hand up. Do you have a question?
I do. Can you hear me, Tom?
Yes.
Hi, Sharon.
Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi. Hi. Thank you so much. I wanted to say two things. One, in regards to what Tom was talking about missed opportunities. And this doesn't fall to the Planning Commission. This falls to the administration. And the hospital is giving $2.5 million to South Burlington to build staff housing. Now, that's a missed opportunity for the city of Burlington. That is a huge missed opportunity. They could live and walk. It would cut down with transportation, satellite parking. That's number one, but that's not on the Planning Commission. That's on us all, the administration and all of us. The second piece is as the Planning Commission looks at Trinity Campus, okay, I'm going to go down memory lane, but not for very long. If you go down into Trinity Campus, on the right-hand side, there are the cottages, that's what they're called. And that piece is small houses that were added to Trinity Campus years ago. But in the conversation, this would be, once again, the administration, maybe that portion could be given back to the community. Those would be perfect long-term houses, and they're really on the fringe of that campus, and maybe they could stay part of the campus. But Emily, what you were talking about the importance of long-term housing that isn't just student housing, I think there are opportunities. And in the back of Trinity Campus, there are 4 small brick dorms that used to be used in the summer for hostels. Once again, if there could be a variety of housing that could be more apartment-like housing that could potentially, as enrollment changes, be converted to long-term housing, maybe not just to house students, but maybe the university and or hospital staff, since they both share University of Vermont as the header for the hospital and the university. I think that these are ways that we as collectively as a community could be smart and potentially meet all of our needs in a more cooperative fashion. I think if we still look at isolation and silos of this is their campus and all there is student housing, I think we're going to miss a lot of opportunities. Thank you so much for letting me speak. I appreciate it.
Always good to hear from you, Sharon.
Thank you, Emily.
Do we have any other questions?
I had a thought. Sorry, can I go ahead? Which is that what I was thinking about this, following up on what Sharon said about the hospital creating some housing for its employees. I've seen that elsewhere. White River Junction, there's a theater company that is going to build housing for 30 people. I was thinking that we should ask the university to build housing for its employees. And I don't know where they would do that. And I doubt they'd be terribly receptive to that idea, but I'm in the midst, I'm a employee of the university, although I work at the hospital, and we're in the middle of a unionizing drive for a non-unionized staff. And there's a lot of them who have many stories about being underpaid and underpaid for years and struggling to make ends meet in Burlington. So I think that is an opportunity where the university could make, a little bit of a difference, at least in providing some housing for its employees.
Just really quickly, I just want to remind everybody that a few years ago, there was a study done, the neighborhood project, which really ultimately focused on turning transient housing into longer term housing. And I'm not sure what the progress is on that. Last time we heard about it, it was really in its infancy. But the whole point was that the city would take a stake in some of the properties as they came up for sale. The rentals in wards 1, wards 8, wards 2, 3, and actually convert them back into condos or multi-units or just longer term rental type properties. So it would take some incentive on the part of the city, but that all that work was done. The study was done. So I think there's ways without building more that we can convert some of the property, some of the property that exists today into longer term housing, whether it's longer term rental or condos or back to owner occupied single family residence, because there's a ton of that property in the city. And I don't know whether maybe it's outside the commission now, it's all in CEDO or.
A neighbor and I bought a house around the corner from where we live, and we rented it to the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program. And there are so many people who need housing and need big houses. Like the family that we rented to is an Afghani family that has 6 kids. And like, that's a unique housing stock that doesn't exist very many places. And it does exist in downtown Burlington. So there are ways as a community, I think on a micro level, to find ways to, get families and get people who need that type of housing into the housing and diversify your neighborhood in that way. So we talk about a lot of things that the city can do for us and that the state needs to do for us. But I think also as community members, we need to do it for ourselves and, really take an ownership stake in our own communities, our own streets, pick up our own garbage, create community, and try to improve some of these problems that we face every day, on our local level, and actually extend ourselves, especially those of us who have resources, to really invest in our own communities and helping out our neighbors in every way that we can to improve how our neighborhood feels and how our neighborhoods support each other.
Any other comments? I've got just sort of a facetious question. Does inclusive zoning apply to, would that apply to UVM dorms?
No, it doesn't apply to dorms. And that's come up in a controversial way before when, like with the Eagles Landing project, they were exempt from inclusive from the low income housing requirements because they were affiliated with the school, but yet they were building long-term housing. And so that ended up being an area of contention. And I think the end game was that a certain number of the students or percentage of the students had to be low income in order to meet that requirement. So that that is kind of a sneaky loophole that is sometimes used.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Informative.
I'm gonna go have
Jonathan, we're going to talk about the budget.
We really have a hard stop at 8:30 because we have to.
And we're going to quickly go. It's been proposed to, we have a bunch of coupons for discounts at Burlington restaurants. And it's been proposed to hand these out to people who are in attendance.
Yeah, at least everybody who's here voluntarily.
So I will be, for those people who are here, if you can hang out for just a minute if you want. And for people who are online, I will drop by your house and hand you one. These are Localvore coupons, and it gives you a discount on for restaurants in Burlington. And with that, I think we're done.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.